Welcome to the Art of Lifting podcast. Today I am joined by Matt Gary. I was about to say GB's own. I guess at this point we're going to claim you as our own after the success that you've just had at Worlds. We spoke briefly during Worlds about some of the coaching and stuff that was going on. I had some questions that I was asking online about the coaching selection and things, particularly with the American team. Obviously you used to be part of that, and also wanted to talk to you about the success of the GB team as well and how well everything went there. And there's a lot of people with different opinions that have come to me, which I definitely want your input on as well, on the game day coaching side of things, what makes the best selection in terms of how the coaching teams should be selected. So obviously I know GB has a pretty set structure with their coaching team and at all levels of international as well. Whereas I think this year, I'm going to use the American team as an example. The episode won't be out yet, but I've done an episode with Alex Kano that will come out the week after this one. And he actually gave me his thoughts on the American selection as well. But essentially they have their head coach, which I think, was he joint head coach with you back in the day?
Yes, that's correct. Mike Zawolinsky.
Yeah. So they had Mike and he was there. And then basically if someone wanted their personal coach there to handle them on the day as well, then that was absolutely fine. They could essentially just put their name down, obviously pay for everything and go over there. And we'll get into that. We will get into that. But I think before we get into that, we should celebrate some of GB's successes. I read off to you, I don't know if I've got it up anymore, the Instagram post that GB put up today. So throughout the GB team, the women came first. They won overall. And the men came second. I can't remember where they both placed last year, but this is definitely an improvement on last year. Do you remember where they placed last year?
Yes, the men were second last year, but only had 41 points, and so we ascended to 46 points. And then last year, the women's team was fifth overall, and we were up 11 points. So we went from 37 to 48.
That's insane.
Yeah, absolutely insane. So a quantum leap, if you will, particularly on the women's side.
Yeah, and then just to brag a little bit more as if I'm part of the team, across the team, open world records, we had four world records.
That's right.
We had 3 European records and 12 British records, all broken throughout the championships. Yeah. Which obviously with GB, the way our team works, you guys do pick the best. It's not like, I think a lot of our listeners obviously are American, and with America, it tends to be winner of each weight class goes for the most part. Whereas in GB, you have to meet the Carpino, and then I think from there, it's essentially the best lifters that have the best chance of placing make the team, which is why we double up in a lot of categories, if I'm not mistaken. So for them to still come in and break all of these records, break so many British records alone, is so cool, let alone obviously world champions on both sides. It was a testament, I think, as well to the team aspect. Like I could tell from social media and from even watching the live stream when Ray, for example, in the 120 plus was lifting in the C group, the camera spun to the audience and the GB team were there screaming for him as he came out for the C group to support their teammate. And I think a lot of people online have been saying about the team aspect this year felt really strong for GB. I just want your input on all of it, Matt. Just want your thoughts on all of it. You were there.
Yeah, first of all, I couldn't be any more ecstatic, quite frankly. I'm just thrilled for the team, for the federation, for the lifters individually, and all of us collectively. And I was telling the team, this was my 26th IPF World Championships. So when you add together all the equipped ones, the classic ones, the masters, the open, you name it, I've been to it, I've coached at them, and it's been an absolute blessing. But this was the 26th, and this is not hyperbole, this is the truth. And I mean this not just because I'm talking to a Brit. This was without question, undoubtedly, the best team I have ever been a part of, ever. And not necessarily the greatest collection of talent, that's not what I'm saying, but this was, to your point, the greatest team from top to bottom. Every single lifter that we had, every person who supported us within the federation on the brass level, to the non-brass level, even to just fans of the sport, personal coaches of the lifters, and of course, the lifters themselves. From top to bottom, this was the best team that I've ever been a part of. And this, like you said, absolutely, the team aspect just permeated. That's part of our ethos. That's part of our culture. And that's what Peach and I have tried to do, is allow that to permeate every corner of this team, so that we truly do feel like a team. It's all for one and one for all. And so to your point, when the lifters compete, they come and support one another. Even when we had lifters in the B group, and in the case of Mo, and of course Ray in the C group, lifters come, they support, they cheer on their teammates. We meet for breakfast on a daily basis, and we have breakfast with one another. We're breaking bread after the competition with each other. Lifters are coming back into the warm-up room in between disciplines to check on one another, to make sure that we're okay, to make sure that the coaching staff has everything that we need. Obviously, the two, the squad sessions that we have leading up to the championships are a big part of that, to, assess fitness and form, to build camaraderie, to instill and install team ethos, and to check on everybody. But yeah, the team culture is just amazing. You can feel it. It is palpable. And I'm just thrilled to have been a part of it. And then clearly on the performance side, right? This is undoubtedly the best performance that this team has ever had. And so the lifters just bless us with their consistency, with their attitude, with their preparation, and of course on game day with their execution. And so I always, I say they make us look good, right? It's the coach's job to put the athletes in the best position to succeed, and that's reflected in the temp selection. And so we try our best. And look, we're completely fallible. We get it wrong sometimes, but most of the time we get it right. And the reason that most of the time we get it right is because our lifters execute at such a high level, and they make a lot of lifts, and they make us look good. And so we are just over the moon excited. Couldn't be any happier with the team this year. So
I think what's also really special about that team side of it is we regularly see a lot of these names year on year at the World Championships with the GB team. Like there's always like staple people like Durins, for example, Annie Nelson, Zayana. There's multiple people like Bobby Butters, I'm not going to name more, that are regularly at the World Championships. So you would expect that team aspect from them because they get to compete together at the World Championships year on year. There was a lot of new faces this year. First time at the World Championships, probably done other internationals and stuff previously, but for it to be that close-knit of a team with people at their first Open World Championship as well, and just to all connect and support each other, the first time a lot of these are on the same team is even more special.
Yeah, I think they kind of play follow the leader. The veterans, as you said, the core, the nucleus of the team, they lead through their actions first and by their words second. And so it's really nice because there's just buy-in from the other team, and they're looking up to those veterans. They're asking questions. Obviously we have a WhatsApp group chat for informal discussions where we handle a lot of that stuff, and we all exchange information and send updates and all that kind of stuff. And you can even see it on social media too. You see the reshares from lifters resharing other people's posts, other people's accolades. It's just constant words of encouragement and support. And like I said, it's contagious. And so I just feel overwhelmingly blessed. And yeah, to your point, the newer lifters bought in, and that bodes really well for them if given the opportunity for them to return, right? Because then they're already part of the culture, they understand, and then they also can pay it forward and potentially bring up, new members of their own.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We're not going to do a play-by-play of everyone, of course. That would be a lot. I do want to ask, though, do you have a favorite session, whether it was because there were just the most lifters in a close battle, or like my personal favorite, partly also because I'm an 84-kilo lifter, was watching Zayana. And I think we briefly spoke before we started recording about like the White Lights Media video of her coming off at the end. Like, I've competed with Zayana before. She's the loveliest human being in the world. She's got the best attitude for like longevity in the sport, and to see her coming off and like being so emotional, and then after hugging everyone, Christian noticed that she was still wearing her belt, and he comes in and grabs it, and like the team aspect of that. And it was very reminiscent of when Durins won back in 2024. Was it 2024?
Yes, Lithuania.
But yeah, that was my personal highlight of the GB, well, all the World Championships, to be fair. Partly obviously because I'm an 84 and I'm just a big fan of Zayana, but I didn't know if you had a particular favorite, maybe one from the women's, one from the men's.
Yeah, Zayana's certainly ranks up there, right? I mean, how could it not? Just the genuine love and affection and appreciation for her, how she's kind of bided her time, so to speak. She's come second a couple of times and then just had this breakthrough performance. And I mean, she routinely has these surgical performances, right? It's like Zayana to go 8 for 9, 9 for 9. I mean, that's what we've all come to expect. And I remember at subtotal after she was done warming up. And of course, I was coaching Josh and Goka in that session, but Will Brown, one of our assistant coaches who did an absolutely phenomenal job this championships. He also coached Joy Damani to a world championship. So I would say he's got two, that he's personally responsible for. But they were getting ready to walk out, and I just remember giving Ziana a fist bump. And I remember saying, just remember, you are the best deadlifter on the planet. And she said, yes, I am. And she smiled. And so that was just really a cool moment that we shared. And then, of course, she went out there and executed like a pro and did the thing and won the championships. That was a highlight. I mean, certainly Joy's was a highlight. I mean, that was really cool to be able to come back and get it, especially after last year. Last year she missed her final deadlift. And so that put her in third place, in bronze on the podium. And so it was nice facing the same opposition this year to come back and connect on that. And so we had a theme that I'd talked about in the weeks leading up, how last year it just felt like we were so close yet so far. We just had a lot of missed connections. And so last year we had 6 successful third deadlifts out of 15. And so I really placed an emphasis on, look, the third deadlift is the single most important lift of the championships. Why? Because it's your last opportunity to score points. It's your last opportunity to put kilos up on the board. It often changes placings, determines the medals, determines team points, all of these things. And so we just have to go out there with intent, with championship execution, and we've got to make some of those this year, and so to the tune of this year we made 9 out of 16. So we had that's a significant improvement, 3 more than last year. And so it was really nice to see Joy come back. And I mean, this lady's done 10 world championships and now she's won 5, which is just an unbelievable record. Like, it seems like every other year she's winning one of these. And so obviously that was huge. And then I think on the men's side, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Christian Iyendoken. I just absolutely love that guy. That was such a phenomenal session to coach in and to see him have this breakthrough performance. He's been knocking on the door. He's come forth the past couple of years, and he said, I'm tired of, being off the podium. I belong on the podium, et cetera. And so for him to have this breakthrough performance where he hits PBs in pretty much every discipline, I think the bench was a tied PB, but it was a squat PB, deadlift PB, and of course a total PB. But to see him execute at such high level, he's another one like Ziana that he routinely makes 8 or 9 lifts. And he's probably, I think, one of the most pragmatic lifters that I've ever coached. This was the 5th time that I've had the pleasure of coaching Christian on game day, between Euros and between World Games, and now, of course, 2 World Championships. There's not been a single time when he's come off the platform and we haven't arrived collaboratively at the same exact number. It's like it's like our brains are connected. And so we're thinking the same thing. And he's very realistic. And so it's nice and it's refreshing to have somebody like that who gives you honest feedback in the moment rather than an emotional knee-jerk reaction. And so anyway, it was a joy to see him come second. And much like the scene with Ziana afterward, Christian was also mobbed by a sea of people who came running into the back. He even had some friends who I think surprised him and traveled there on the day and brought their child. And so it was absolutely amazing. He was just overwhelmed with joy and exuberance and, encouragement and support from everybody. So that was a really cool scene. So yeah, I think those are the ones that kind of stick out for me. I think probably one of the most intense sessions was the 120s, just because of the depth. I don't know that we've ever seen depth. Well, we haven't seen depth like that in a 120 kilo class, where quite literally anybody from the A group and even Mo from the B group, albeit he had a little bit of an underperformance there in the deadlift, but any of those people could have podiumed. You know what I mean? Rondell was a clear runaway favorite and was going to do his thing, but literally you could make a really strong case for penciling in just about anybody else. And so that was a really fun session. And of course, it was fun to coach Josh. I was able to coach him at the British this past year. And so he is just as cool as the other side of the pillow. He is so chill and so laid back, almost like I'm a little bit nervous that he's a little bit too laid back sometimes. So I'm like, got to give him a little bit of a kick in the ass. But yeah, he executed like a pro and did everything that we asked of him. And so I think those are kind of the biggest highlights for me.
Yeah, no, I'm literally just remembering watching all these sessions you're talking about. It feels like so long ago, even though it was literally what, Sunday it finished. If it's now Wednesday,
Exactly.
no, I think they were amazing. It was really cool watching the 120s as well. Like you say, like there was such a battle throughout anyway, and we had these really experienced lifters in Ashton and Etienne, and then we had Josh and Joseph McDonald end up on the podium because they just executed so well, and they're just like the loveliest people as well, and it was just so fun to watch it play out that way. And like even the 120 plus as well, to be fair, past Jesus there was so much depth. Like Timo came back, like obviously Ray, I think, had Ray been allowed in the prime time session,
no,
it's so heartbreaking. Obviously there's reasons behind it. I spoke about that in the recap that I did anyway, but it was so heartbreaking because I think Ray is a lifter that you can tell he gets fired up as well in competition. So had he been in that battle, who knows what would have ended up happening.
Yeah, he very likely could have been on the podium as well. I mean, it's and certainly had a shot for it because he's got a big deadlift. So yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I'm trying. Were there, and so our first lifters were on the third day, if I'm not mistaken.
They were, yeah. We didn't have any 47s or 52s, and we didn't have 59, 66, or 74. So, that's part of the reason, to your point, why we kind of double up in a lot of weight classes. We put forth the team selection criteria, and quite frankly, a lot of people think that it's nepotism, and it's not. The team self-selects, right? The team picks itself according to the criteria. It's our objective to make it based upon a meritocracy and for people to earn their right to be on the team. And to your point, we, in theory, want to take objectively the best team that we can. And that's why we write the criteria the way that we do. And the team self-selects. And so, so we didn't really get started. The championship started on Saturday. So it was nice to just kind of be a fan and go as a spectator the first couple of days. But our work week began on Monday when Bobby and Joy kicked us off with the 57s.
Yeah. And what a way to kick off the start of the competition.
Oh, what a brilliant session that was too. Yeah, for sure. That was so much fun.
So did you watch the first 2 days? Did you see the 59s was probably my favorite battle to watch on the men's side of the whole competition. And the fact that I'm saying that feels really cool as well, obviously, because previously that's not really been the case. Like you'd always tune in because it'd be like Waskar, let's see what he does. And obviously last year with Ivan doing really, really well. But this year having Ivan and Mike in such a battle, it's just a fantastic way to start the competition.
Indeed.
Also start the questionable calls on coaching, which we'll go into.
Yeah, but to your point, to have now 5 lifters, I think, above the 600 kilo threshold is really remarkable. And so it's really nice to see the growth and development in those weight classes when ordinarily it's kind of this one horse race. And so it's nice to be able to watch a battle.
Yeah. Same thing with the 47s as well. Like realistically, I know Tiff runaway, fantastic performance from her. She's looking incredibly strong. But we had Amelie and we had Leanne Lee as well, who were, especially on nominations, super close. They obviously didn't maybe have the exact days that they wanted, but am I right in thinking Amelie's going to Sheffield now anyway?
I think
Amelie's got an invite, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll get to see that again. And obviously we've got both the fact that we have both the 59s at Sheffield as well. The fact that Mike managed to be the next highest percentage of the world record from the 59 class, which that record, as we all know, has sat for a very long time and looked untouchable for the longest time as well.
That's right. Yep. Since 2016 is in Colleen is when the record was achieved. So, yeah.
So I think this is probably a good time to talk about the coaching side of it. And I have made it very clear, if anyone's listened to my recaps, it was never a target at any individual coaches themselves. I was very intrigued by the American coaching team because obviously knowing what GB is like, and even Western Europeans later this year with Owen now as the head coach, we had to fill an application form in order to get selected to go. And that's more of a developmental comp for coaches wanting to get into international coaching, right? So I know full well that to coach on like the open team in GB, which GB's team is quite clearly competitive, very competitive now. But then when you see the level of strength the American team brings every single year, and the men's look like a runaway favorite. I mean, to be fair to them, they do tend to run away and win, right? And like the women as well, they have such a depth of talent. It really confused me that there was just the thing of your personal coach can come handle you if you want them to, no matter the experience level. And I know a lot of the ones that went, like Marcellus, for example, even Alex as well, to be fair. I don't know a lot of the other ones, so they're probably going to be the two I refer to the most. They are experienced game day coaches with their own lifters, like at national competitions and things and at local meets, whatever. But it's just this really weird concept to me that their decisions weren't all being overlooked by a head coach. And when I put this out to other people, they were like, surely there's no better person to handle you than your own personal coach, because they can read the numbers that you have left. And like I said, the episode with Alex won't be out when this comes out. It'll come out the week after. But Alex said to me, he wishes that there was more guys. He gave you his props. He said he knows when you were in charge, it was a bit different. And I've actually had quite a few people saying to me they miss Matt Gary. So a little bit of ego boost for you there. But he basically said, in theory, personal coaches are great for calling your numbers. So maybe when it comes to building the subtotal, they have got a slightly better eye in terms of what does my lifter have left. But when it gets to those decisions around placing on the deadlift, what you're pulling for, what you need versus what you have, that's where the experience of an actual game day head coach is really important. And I guess I wanted your opinion on that. You are the game day coaching man, so.
Well, I certainly appreciate the affirmations and the encouragement that people have said about me. That's always nice to hear. Yeah, I have literally and figuratively been on every side of this coin, or every side of this cube, if you want to call it that, outside of being the elite athlete myself. So I've been a national team head coach. I've been an assistant. I've been a personal coach. I have been the spouse of an athlete. I have been the person who actually writes the training for an athlete. So I think I've seen all of that. And so now, having experienced it on the GB side, as you said, in America, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, because and I am really keen to hear Alex's explanation of it. But my understanding is that they've got, head coach, who is Mike Zawolinski. That's the gentleman who I was co-head coaches with in 2024. And then they have some assistants, but beneath that, they've got the personal coaches. And to your point, when the nominations come out, or teams are allowed to nominate 12 coaches. And so, when you have 16 lifters, there is a couple of personal coaches, like Marcellus as an example. He had 3 athletes, right? He had Ashton, he had Leanne Lee, and he had Austin Nikolai. So that's 3. And so they allowed, or they nominated Marcellus to be a personal coach. The beauty of the personal coach concept is, to your point, arguably nobody knows that lifter better than the personal coach. They're the one that writes the recipe. They're the one that does the training. They're the one that oversees all the videos. They get all the feedback from the athlete. Some personal coaches, I know it's rare, but some have an opportunity to actually train with their clients. I know that in the virtual sense, now that we do everything virtually and online, that's, less frequent, but it does happen occasionally. In the case of like Dom Wasabas for New Zealand, he trains, or he's able to be right there with Carlina every step of the way. So there is value in the personal coach, in that, in theory, they know their lifter better than anybody else. Where it becomes an issue for me is the fact that the personal coach is largely singularly invested in their own lifter. And to your point, we started out the episode talking about the team concept. And the difference is that on the GB side, I have a staff, and every single member of that staff, not only are they qualified, not only are they experienced in game day coaching at the international level, but they are deeply invested in the team. They're deeply invested in every single individual, and then the collective, right? Not just a singular person. So it's not like they coach their one athlete, they rock up and coach that person, and they bounce and they're gone and they vanish. You know what I mean? They're invested in the performance of all of the lifters. So the personal coaches, that's one problem. The other problem is if there is not a very clear-cut chain of command and a division of labor that has been communicated and articulated from the head coach down through the ranks, right? We get this too many cooks in the kitchen scenario. And so a lifter comes off the platform, the personal coach is there, perhaps an official assistant or even the head coach is there, and you're having this 3-way conversation between people, and it's like, who makes the final decision, right? And so if they've given some autonomy and they've let the rope out a little bit to these personal coaches to call some of the numbers, to your point, Sean, some of them don't have the experience in the most critical moments, which are after the subtotal, right? In the front 6, we're just kind of building the total, or in theory, we're building the total, unless, of course, we have a lifter who's not a threat for the podium, but only a threat for an individual medal, And in those most critical moments, you have this too many cooks in the kitchen scenario, and that doesn't sit well with me. I think, one of the things that we do on the GB side, and I like to use this analogy, is, because my role is the head coach, I am not a dictator, but I am the boss. And so that's not my leadership style. That's not my leadership preference to be an authoritarian. But the chain of command is that I'm at the top and I'm the boss, and I'm responsible for the team, and I'm ultimately responsible for each and every athlete, their welfare, their performance, their well-being, all of these different things. And then, of course, I've got my right hand, Alex Pearson Jones, who's the coaching lead. I really, quite frankly, see him as pretty much my equal, certainly from an acumen and a game day coaching skill set perspective. He is incredibly skilled at game day coaching, knows all the techniques, the tactics, etc., does a phenomenal job. And I've got Will Brown. And then this year, of course, we had Eddie Nelson and we had Jamie Laidlaw. So we've got a staff of 5 people, but everybody understands the chain of command. They understand how it works. They understand who in that moment is going to make the final call. And I just think on the American side, when you have a lack of true leadership and a lack of chain of command, and again, the division of labor has not really been outlined. And look, I might listen to your podcast and hear the exact opposite. I don't know what he said, so I'm going to be keen to listen to that. But my understanding is that it's just this, there's a lot of fluidity. And so in those most critical moments, there needs to be a person who is making the final decision. That doesn't mean that there's not a collaboration. That doesn't mean that the lifter comes off the platform and I completely veto everything that they say, that I'm not listening to them. Of course I'm listening to the athlete. It's my job to read the athlete. I use the analogy every time the lifter takes an attempt. It is his or her audition. They are auditioning for me to show me, hey, this is what I'm capable of on the next attempt. Whereas I'm using that lift or that performance as a diagnostic tool to diagnose how many kilos do they have in reserve. And of course, in the point of the deadlift, not only am I assessing kilos in reserve, but I'm looking at the scoreboard and I'm reading the situation. So it's one thing, to your point, and you brought it up, you said it without saying it. A lot of these personal coaches, they can do this very elementary math. I mean, it's not difficult math. It's addition and subtraction. It's not that hard. And they also can read their lifter, but can they read the scenario? Can they read the situation? Can they read the other lifters? Are they paying attention to the other lifters? Do they know the tactics and the strategies employed by other national team coaches and their assistants? They may have scouted the other lifters, but do they know, what Garrett Bentley from Canada is used to doing in this particular situation? And so it's, look, these decisions are not made in a vacuum. There's a lot of factors taking place. But I, having been on every side of this, I now much prefer the setup that we have on the GB side, because I can trust Alex Pearson Jones. I can trust Will Brown. And I have also given them the freedom, given them the latitude. Yes, I'm the head coach. Yes, I'm the boss. Yes, I'm ultimately responsible, but I've also given them the authority to coach specific athletes and make the calls on those athletes. And when you give them that trust and you give them that freedom, they are then able to shine. And so the symbiotic relationship that we have on the GB side is absolutely brilliant. I think it's wonderful. I'm over the moon excited with our staff. And yeah, you see a lot of other staffs from a lot of other countries, and the lowest hanging fruit here is to pick on the Americans. And I'm not saying this is sour grapes, or whatever, but they've fumbled the ball in a variety of scenarios and made some really kind of head-scratching decisions. So
I think the reason that we're so quick to use the Americans as an example as well isn't because they did the worst job, because they absolutely didn't. There are a lot of countries we just kind of expect it from. The amount of recaps I filmed where I was like, I think a good example here is Etienne in the 120s. He loaded the world record on his second deadlift. Well, yeah, I think he'd have only needed 380 something to come second. So that was an easy example, but you would kind of expect it from these countries that aren't, vying for winning the world championships every year. Whereas I think a team as acclaimed as the American team, you just expect the best level of game day coaching because they have really the best level of talent. They have the deepest talent pool across all the weight classes.
I agree. And I think also because a lot of people might listen to what I just said and they might scoff at it and say, oh, well, you don't like or you don't put any value or an investment in the lifters' personal coaches and the ones that are writing the training. And that is absolutely categorically false, because I reach out to the personal coaches literally after the team is selected. There's an intake form that I have every athlete fill out. And within that intake form, they give me the contact info of their personal coach. And I'm in frequent communication with their personal coach throughout the process, leading up to the World Championships. Obviously, we use our athlete monitoring system, and particularly in those last 5 to 6 critical weeks, I'm in frequent contact. I create these miniature group chats on WhatsApp that I use with the lifter and their personal coach. And I'm in touch on a frequent basis. And then of course we hop on a strategy call, and the three of us, that is me, the athlete and the personal coach, we collaboratively install the game plan, because the personal coach, oftentimes on the GB side, the personal coach doesn't travel to the championships, obviously.
Yeah.
But we've collaboratively installed this game plan, and we're working together. And that way, the personal coaches feel heard, they feel valued, they feel like they've been able to throw their hand in the pile, and they're contributing to our team's success well. So to all the personal coaches out there on the GB side who wrote the training, kudos to you all as well, because, in large part, you help get the lifters there to the championships, remaining healthy and arriving in top form. And then we, of course, executed the strategy on game day. So I think it works best when people feel valued, when people feel invited into the conversation, and they feel heard. Because, like I said, I'm not a dictator, but I'm the boss.
Yeah. I think a couple points there. So I think firstly, like having that level of, if there's a last minute decision that needs to be made and you say a number, realistically, you are in charge. They're going to use your number. And it made me think of so I've only coached internationally once so far, which was at Uni Worlds 2024. And Dan Clark, head coach, fantastic job. And we had loads of experienced coaches, and then we had a couple of us that hadn't done it before. And so we were down as assistant coaches. And the way they kind of described Dan's style as a head coach is, he'll let you drive as if when you're learning to drive, you have the dual controls. He's only going to put his foot on the brake if he needs to, but he's going to trust in you. Obviously, first couple of days, assistant coaching, learning the number side, getting taught by more experienced people, and then it's switching roles. And I think as soon as you feel like you have that trust from the head coach and the more experienced coaches, as a coach, you feel way more confident. You feel way more able to say if you're not confident. And also you just have that trust within the team. Mm-hmm. The other thing I was going to say as well that made me think is from the athlete perspective. So I've done Commonwealth a couple of times, and both times I did Commonwealth. First time I hadn't met any of the coaches before. Paul Marsh was head coach, and I had Sam, who actually coaches Ziana, as my coach on the day. That was when I was a junior. I had no idea what I was doing. I was really nervous. But a big part of the international experience is getting coached by the international coaching team, having to be coached and handled by someone that doesn't know them personally. But that's part of being an international athlete. That's part of trusting in these coaches that are experienced, that have these skill sets, and just being the athlete and letting them be the coach for the day. And I think that's a big part of the experience for the athlete.
It is a huge part of the experience for the athlete. And on top of that, if we, the staff, have done our due diligence along the way, then we are then going to look, are we ever going to know that athlete as well as the personal coach? No, of course not. We're not, because we don't have that, daily interaction. But if we've done our homework, we've done the proper communication, we've done the proper athlete monitoring, the strategy calls, etc., and we've looked after our athletes in the lead up to the championships, then we're going to have a really, really good picture of that athlete, the form that they're arriving in, their tendencies. I mean, my questionnaire is pretty detailed when it asks questions about preferences, about, is there any particular things that you need to hear? Not only are there do's, but what are some things that are off limits? What are some things that are some don'ts? Some lifters might not want to be slapped on the back. I mean, whatever, I certainly wouldn't invade someone's personal space without knowing that lifter, but there's little things, there's a lot of nuance. And so if we've done our homework in the lead up, and again, collaboratively done all of this homework, then I really think we arrive and we're in really good shape. And so, and everybody, there's a level of buy-in that comes. And again, that all goes back to the previous conversation about feeling like a team rather than a collection of individuals. And that was apparent that Team USA was a collection of individuals. You know, they didn't eat together at breakfast. I mean, some of them did. You know, they in large part weren't there to support one another. You know, they would lift and leave. You know, there weren't that many of them at the banquet. I mean, just a lot of things. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to necessarily throw them under the bus, but I'm just trying to use some credible examples to, you know.
Yeah, I think they're just the easiest example as well, because we all follow the American team. They're just the easiest ones to use as an example. And I think the contrast is quite interesting. So do you think that's changed quite a lot since you were part of the coach? Obviously, you're co-head coach. Has that changed a lot since you were there then?
Well, we did allow personal coaches when I was there in 2024. But respectfully, again, there was a chain of command. There was a division of labor. So, you know, look, I'm not going to sit here and constantly pat myself on the back, but one of the things that I feel like I do well is I'm a very effective communicator. And so I use all channels and all modes and methods of communication. And so I am going to be in frequent contact with you so that you know, you understand what's going to happen, how this is going to unfold, et cetera, et cetera. And so, look, the personal coaches were brought into the conversation. There were personal coaches in Lithuania who were by my side, and I valued them, but every single person knew that I had the attempt cards, and I was the one writing the attempt on the slip. And often, look, and if we've done our homework, then oftentimes, even in 2024, I did agree with the personal coach, you know, or whatever. But I also had some veto power if I thought that, you know, to your point, they were putting a number on the bar that was, you know, bad or not in that athlete's best interests. So I think, you know, and again, I keep saying I'm looking forward to hearing the podcast with you and Alex, but I think now they've got a head coach, but they're pretty much letting the personal coaches in large part call the shots. And I think that's where, you know, there's some mishaps.
Yeah, and obviously not to speak for Alex, but if you listen to the episode, that's pretty much what he kind of said. I think for him as well, he had Janae in the 69s. Well, when I was writing my notes for the recap of the 69s, as everything was playing out live, I had to note for all 8 of those women, because 7 of those 8 were vying for second place, including Janae, his lifter. So for him to be thrown into the deep end without very in-depth support for that many lifters, for anyone of any experience level, that's a lot to deal with.
It is a lot to deal with. And so, yeah, that's why I just pride myself on communicating and on supporting the staff and even supporting the personal coaches. Had I been on the American side, I would have liked to have think that, you know, some of those situations might have unfolded a little bit differently. And, you know, this isn't the first time. There's a pattern. It happened the year before I came on in 2023 in the 66 kilo class, where they allowed somebody who had never game day coached at an international championships, even a nationals, coach Brian Lee in the 66s. And I don't know if you recall, but he opened up, I think, with a world record in the deadlift and just absolutely botched that. And then, of course, they had Bonica Baum in the 84 pluses that year. And it's just some of the decisions that they made were unconscionable. And so I think I was able to come in 2024 and then kind of right the ship. And then there was this friction in politics. And here I am, just thrilled to be a part of the GB family. So, yeah.
It worked out for the best for us.
Yeah, I'm very, very thankful to be part, and everybody has embraced me as one of their own. And I too have bought into the ethos and to the culture. And of course I've, you know, kind of put my own signature on that, but I'm not trying to, you know, this is the GB team. This isn't Matt Gary's team. It's not, you know, Jens Kangama. It's British powerlifting. It is Team GB. And so we are truly a team in every sense of the word. And so, yeah, I'm just, like I said, ecstatic to be a part of it.
Yeah. And we can see this year, the team aspect definitely worked, and it definitely helped everyone perform. I also wanted to ask you on the refereeing side. So as you were there, I'm sure you were able to see there was a lot. Every year, obviously, it's a sport. No matter what sport you watch, there are going to be people disagreeing with referees in all ways. Yep. This year felt particularly worse, especially like I usually try and avoid talking about it. I am a referee myself, and I know when I'm in the chair, things look different to when they're on camera. That is a fact. You're not in the referee's chair. You don't really get a valid opinion a lot of the time. This year, however, with the new bench rule in particular, there was just a lot of inconsistencies throughout the whole championships. And I'm not going to sit here and say, do you agree there were some terrible decisions? I'm going to sit here and say, do you have any thoughts on, I probably should have prepped you for this one. Do you have any thoughts on what can maybe be done? I think the bench press is the easiest example with like the new kind of upper body thrust rule and the inconsistencies there, the depth rule. Do you have any thoughts on like productive ways for us to deal with it?
Well, it really feels like we're putting Band-Aids on a gunshot wound. Right. And the bench thing is a serious problem. And look, I think that the easiest way to examine it is to say we need to repeal the rule. I personally think we need to scrap it and start over. Right. I really do think that. I mean, I think we can all agree in what they were trying to eliminate were these short range of motion circus style benches, right? And so they implemented a rule with elbow depth and all that sort of thing. And it's, while there are objective criteria that are supposed to be met, they are viewed subjectively. And because they are viewed subjectively, I don't think well, as a matter of fact, I know the referees cannot agree on what proper depth looks like. And that's a real shame, because we see it at the front end of the championships where these lightweight women and lightweight guys are sacrificed on this altar of bench depth. And it is absolutely infuriating. And it's a travesty. And then as the week goes, sometimes we feel like, yeah, the standards get a little softer. And look, I get it, because I've refereed at these international championships. It's a long week. There's an element of fatigue that steps in. And so I've mentioned some things to the brass, that I think the rule needs to be repealed, they need to start over. I always thought all along that they could have solved the problem, or at least eliminated most of these short range of motion bench press, by just bringing the grip in, right? And make maximum legal grip width. Your pinky is on the ring finger, or I'm sorry, is on the power ring. That's 82 centimeters. Now, your index finger, your first finger, is allowed to cover. So if you bring that in, that right there on most people's hands is going to change their grip width 2 to 4 inches on either side. That's a significant difference. And I think that, coupled with the fact of a good rule of not being able to put your feet up on the bench when you set up, I think keeping that piece, but then just changing, and forget the bench depth rule, because look, it is objective. Your pinky would either be covering the ring or inside the ring or not. And that would be very easy to judge. I'm not in favor of this. Some have said regulating grip based on weight class. I think that's ridiculous, because at times then you forget who's laying down on the bench. Is this a 63 or a 69? And that's absurd, particularly at local level meets where the flights are mixed. And then you're asking yourself, my goodness, what person, you have to ask the lifter, what is this weight class? And so I don't like that rule. But I think that's the thing. I also think the referees, quite frankly, I don't think that once a referee, always a referee. I'm an IPF Cat 2 referee, and I've been a national referee before that for longer than I can count. But I think that the single most critical characteristic of referees is eyesight. And I think referees should have to prove their vision. I think they should have to have eye tests and prove that their vision is satisfactory, that they can see what they're looking at. That's a huge thing. And again, I don't think once a referee, always a referee. I think referees should be re-credentialed probably every 3 to 5 years to include not only a written exam, but a practical exam. And I know that these things are easier said than done. So perhaps they happen on a federation level, and then they extend to the international level. But I think that would be huge, because look, if we got all the international referees in a room together, myself included, we put all of us in a room together, and we had a whiteboard, right? And it had the diagram of squat depth that we're all used to seeing, and it had the diagram of bench depth. And then I walked around the room and I handed everybody these little magnets, or these little dots. And I said, we're all going to walk up to the board here, and we're going to put a dot on what we believe to be the top surface of the knee, and then the top surface of the hip, at the hip joint, the hip crease. I guarantee you there'll be dots everywhere. And so the point is, is that while the rule is written a certain way, the interpretation of the rule and our subjective analysis and the way that we view lifters executing said rule is largely different. And so I think we all need to get on the same page. And it was great that they revised the rule book this past year. That was good. And we should give them a round of applause. But while they were busy high-fiving themselves and patting themselves on the back for a cleaner, fresher-looking PDF, still there's so much that gets lost in translation. That rule book is not written by someone whose primary language is English, right? I had a look at the rule book. The president himself sent me a copy of it and wanted me to look at it. And it was rife with mistakes and grammatical errors and this, that, and the other thing. And so, look, there needs to be a clear overhaul. And I think bench depth is the easiest thing to look at. And that's probably where I would start, because it's just really a shame that lifters train their tail off and they pour so much into the sport. And then they go to a competition like this and they're being judged by people who can't agree, and then decisions are made that just really, it's kind of like, it's head scratching for you and I. We kind of look at it and we're like, what are you looking at? And if the jury are routinely overturning lifts, then why are they the ones sitting in the chairs? And why aren't you then removing the people that are in the chairs? Because that's a nonverbal communication to us, to the coaches, to the athletes, to the fans, to the spectators, that the three people in the chairs aren't cutting the mustard. And so they need to be removed. So anyway, I know I just dropped the bomb on the whole situation. But yeah, I mean, those are some of the things that I would do to fix it or to help it. But as I said at the start, it just feels like we're putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound.
Yeah.
And we continue to do that. And so I think we're going to continue to have issues until they just take a step back, raise their hands and say, you know what? We got this wrong. Yeah. And they would win so much favor from the athletes, from the coaches, from the public, if they just admitted, you know what, we got this one wrong. And you know what, it's okay. People make mistakes. Let's start over. Let's get it sorted. Let's get some of the brightest minds in this sport together and come up with a framework that makes sense. That upholds the integrity and the standards of competition. People compete in the IPF for a reason, because they want to be held to a high standard. They want to be judged critically, but we also want it to be fair and consistent. And right now it's not.
Yeah, I also think as well, I don't know that they will get rid of the bench depth rule. I hope they do. Everything you've just said, I'm in full agreement with. But with the bench depth rule, if they were to just sit back and scrap it, it's not like any records were removed from before it got changed anyway. It won't change. They won't have to do anything more than put their hands up and say, okay, we're taking this away. So it is an actual legitimate solution to the problem, and then they can have a think of what they actually want to do to solve it. I'd be interested on your thoughts. So Owen from GB, from Nathaniel's coach, when the bench depth rule was first brought in, I remember him saying his idea of a solution would, or just to make bench press more viewable, because I think that's a big part of the problem, isn't it? That's the bit where people tune out. It's not as interesting. It's not as exciting watching people bench. As much as I love bench press, it's not fun to watch. He suggested shortening the timer. Rather than having a full minute for bench press, maybe we have 30 seconds for bench press. You can't have quite as elaborate of a setup. There will still be some very quick people setting up with short range of motion, but generally speaking, it's easier to watch then because it's a much shorter. Maybe 30 seconds is too short, but that was one of his suggestions when it was years ago and it was first a thing. I'd be interested on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that I would shorten up the time. I am in favor of getting rid of the liftoff, and I have been in favor of that for a long time, and that's coming from someone who benefits very greatly from a liftoff. Okay.
So do I. So I'd like to keep that there.
Yeah. And look, I know the equipped lifters would go bananas if you ban the liftoff, right? That's actually been put forth as a proposal, and of course it's been shot down. But I think that would solve some of the problems as well, because a lot of people complain about liftoffs, and if you took away the liftoff, then it's totally on you. And so I think we would briefly see the numbers come down, but then we'd see a reset, because people adapt. You'd start training without a liftoff, right? Yeah, so I don't know. I haven't heard the whole time one. I do think with respect to what Owen said, yeah, that would certainly eliminate some of these elaborate setups. Yeah, I'm just not so sure. Yeah, that eliminating the time and making it different than the other two disciplines, you kind of want to have that uniformity with every discipline. And so
I guess as well, it would take away from the thing of if there is maybe an issue with how you've set up and the referee needs to tell you to re-rack, you then have no chance of getting the list, which granted, that shouldn't be happening anyway, but obviously we know it does sometimes. So I guess that would also maybe cause more problems there. But yeah, I think there's other solutions to the problem outside of just bench depth.
And we do have some bright people in this sport, some bright people in the IPF and at the various federation levels, and it would be really nice to get some of those people together and get this sorted, because it's really frustrating, and we have some of these conversations just recurring every single year, and I feel so sorry for some of these lifters who are just being sacrificed with this rule. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Another question I have for you then, to do with kind of the new rules and everything. So I'm assuming you were at the technical meeting at the start of the championships.
Yes.
Did they go over the new rules? So I know at Bench Worlds they did, because obviously it was the first international with the new rules, and obviously bench only, they have to go down how these rules should be refed. Did they do that at the technical meeting for this one?
They did not. They did it at the European Championships that I was at in Malta. So immediately following the technical meeting there, we actually had, for lack of a better word, a rules meeting or a rules briefing, if you will, where they went over, because that, in that case, that was back in March, the new rule book had just been released. And so Urban Mur, who is the president of the Slovenian Federation, he got up and spoke and answered questions. And I think there was great utility in that. But no, they did not have one at this championships.
So even that could be, if they're going to refuse to get rid of the rules and change the rules, having that as a mandatory briefing at the start, especially, the European referees are probably then going to be, that were at Euros, are going to be reffing it differently to the referees that haven't had that kind of briefing before. So even that was something I was interested to know, because I thought maybe they'd have gone over it, but I'm interested that they haven't. I think that's quite strange not to go over that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Like I said, it's clear that not everyone is on the same page. And just because we can all read in the rule book the same 3 or 4 sentences together, it's making sure that we are in agreement of how that looks, not just on paper, but in motion. You need to have examples, videos, etc. So, there are other more, shall I say, for lack of a better word, modern sports. There's one called street lifting now. And if you take a look at their rule book, I could actually send you the PDF. I can do that after this. Their rule book is incredible, because it has hyperlinks within the rule book, and you can click on it and it'll go to a YouTube video about that exact rule. And so I think it would be really cool if in the IPF, look, you could use our media team and some of the photographers and stuff like that, and engage some of the more popular lifters, and also lifters of different, what's the word I'm looking for? Weight class demographics and body types, because clearly bench depth on a super looks way different than bench depth on a 47. And so I think there would be great utility in having more fleshed out demonstrations, videos, of these rules and what they look like in motion.
I think that's actually a really, really good idea. I'd really be interested to see that if you would send over. But
yes, I'd be happy
I think that's a fantastic idea. And the people that, like, White Lights Media is an easy example. The people involved within this sport, the media teams, the companies that are investing, all of it, we all love this sport so much that they would be happy to be part of that project if it made the sport better and helped the sport grow. Because I think at the moment, I don't know if it's the same over in America. Obviously, I know you guys have Powerlifting America and USAPL, and obviously there was a lot of people kind of going to either or for a while. But over in the UK, with the rise of other federations coming in, a lot of people see, like, me posting content about the IPF and about Worlds and things, and the instant go-to is, there's other federations, right? But I don't want to go to another federation. If my athletes can compete where they want to, but obviously then there's the friction of being able to handle them at nationals and things. But I don't want to go to another federation, because I think this is where the most talent is. And the more talent that you're competing with, the stronger you're going to be. Like, look at the rise of GP. When Henry Tosh was head coach 2022, and he put in the A totals and B totals for international selection, we saw an absolute up haul in totals for the top level lifters in the country, and then everyone trickled up with it. And then when British Nationals, was it last year? It was the first year that they had was it top 12 of us that went to Nationals? I should remember this. I was literally there.
That's right.
Again, the 84 kilo class, that's usually one of the emptier classes in our country. Super stacked class. There were so many of us battling similar totals, and it was really exciting. And having that really does level you all up. Like, I wouldn't be this strong if I was competing in another federation where I was already one of the higher level lifters. And then I'd look over at the IPF and see Zayana 120 kilos ahead of me on total and go, well, I'm not very good. Whereas if I'm competing with her, I see what's possible. So I want to bring eyes into the IPF, and I want to bring that. And I know everyone else feels the same. So it couldn't be, I don't think it would be that difficult to get people on board to create this rule book that is clearer, a bit more concise with those demonstrations in it.
I agree entirely with everything you just said, for sure.
Yeah. I think we can probably start wrapping up soon. I've kept you for about an hour.
Yeah.
Didn't know if there were any other highlights or stories from the World Championships that we've not covered that you wanted to go through, or anything you've got coming up to talk through.
Yeah, I guess I'll put it out there just because maybe a lot of people don't know. I'll just mention this little coaching bit. So clearly on the GB side, we double up in a lot of weight classes. So this kind of goes back to our process, our chain of command, our division of labor. When you have two athletes in the same weight class who are so close in strength and who are both vying for the same positioning, the same title, etc., the most ethical thing to do is to split the two lifters, right? We can warm up on the same platform. We're all part of Team GB. But when you have two lifters like a Jurins Kagamo and an Ade Omasakan, like a Bobby Butters and a Joy Namani, like Mo and Josh, etc., AJ Ray, this year a Quinn Toyosi, those are the examples. It is imperative that you split those two athletes and that each lifter deserves their own advocate. I kind of liken it to their defense attorney in court. And quite frankly, you can't play chess against yourself on game day, right? Because in theory, if I'm making a move for Jurins, then that move is for him and literally against Ade. And so, it's kind of like boxing. I wouldn't coach both athletes in boxing. I mean, that's one of the the most obvious examples is running over to one person's corner and say, hey, watch out for the hook. And then, so anyway, so in that particular situation, I think that is the most ethical thing to do. Clearly, if you have two athletes who are competing and they are worlds apart, then you can ethically vouch for both of them. You can call the attempts for both of them. And we've had situations back on the American side when I was coaching with them where we did have athletes that were significantly apart, in the same weight class, and you could ethically, be the game day coach for either of them. I just wanted to add, in the case of Jurins this year, I'm looking forward to seeing, I think he had an MRI yesterday. So just matter of factly, Jurins was injured on his third squat. When he went down and started to come up on that third squat, he felt a violent pop in his elbow. And so I think you could see it after he racked the bar. I think he even grabbed his arm and his elbow. And so when he came over, he told me that. And so I just wanted people to know that he was injured. And so I think he posted in his story that he had an MRI. I know that when we were in Lithuania, he had a virtual appointment with a doctor who kind of, via laptop, and kind of, had him run through a battery of tests and some range of motion and so forth. And so there was a little bit of a diagnosis there, but I don't think you get the true picture, pardon the pun, until you get the imaging done. And so I'm keen to see what his health is like. Of course, we all wish the best for Jurins. So it also speaks to his level of talent. The fact that this man, on an off day, getting injured, still totaled 845 kilos and maintained position on the podium. Just extraordinary. I think, oftentimes these other performances, all kudos and shout out to Ade Omasaka, just over the moon ecstatic for him, winning his first world championships, totaling what he did, only missing his final deadlift. Just an exceptional performance for him, and kudos to Peach for just calling a great game with Ade. As excited as I am for him, some of these other stories just kind of get lost. And so I think there's value in kind of mentioning those. Not that I'm trying to steal Ade's shine, because I'm not, but it's just some of these other stories kind of get lost. It's kind of like when we go to Sheffield, the focus is on the winner, but there's these other extraordinary performances that sometimes get lost in this ocean of competition. And so anyway, I just figured I would mention that. So kudos to Jurgens. He hung in there and he fought, and we were able to maintain that podium position. Thank God. And sometimes you get a little bit lucky. I thought Enna was actually going to make that final pull. I think a lot of us were kind of holding our breaths. So I was very thankful, obviously, that he didn't make it, just selfishly, from the Jurgens side and the GB side. But those are some of the stories that kind of go on, behind the scenes. I thought that was one worth mentioning. I guess some of the others, the situation with Mo, where he ran out for his second deadlift and he forgot his belt. So in that situation, I'll also just transparently tell you something that we did kind of from an ethics standpoint, just to kind of let you know kind of how we handled that. I was coaching Josh and Goka in the evening session, in the A session. So I personally didn't feel like it was ethically responsible if I were to also be coaching Mo in the morning. Like, that doesn't sit well, but I was there to offer some level of support. I wanted to be boots on the ground. I wanted to be in the building, in the room. So I was helping, with some of the loading and so forth and kind of getting him ready, but wasn't doing any of the strategic, any of that stuff. I was looking at the board, kind of just looking at the score. And then I looked up the video and saw him run out for his deadlift. I wasn't prepping him. I wasn't getting him ready. And I saw that he ran out. And I realized, I was like, wait a second, he doesn't have his belt on. And I was like frantic. And I grabbed his belt and ran around the side. And just as he was like crouching down and setting up and getting into position, I literally debated, like, do I scream at him and try to get his attention to get him to, but that's going to completely break his concentration, and disrupt his process, because we all have this habit, this ritual that we run through. And I was like, man, and I didn't say anything. And then of course he pulled it beltless, but it didn't meet the standard. But actually talking to Mo afterwards, he goes, to be quite honest, he goes, I don't think I would have heard you. He's like, I was so locked in and so, hyper focused, and the adrenaline was just kicking so much that he just had this moment of brain fog and didn't realize that he'd run out there with his belt. So that was kind of one of these one-off scenarios that probably doesn't get talked about. I think a lot of lifters were even screaming at him from the audience, like, your belt. And he just didn't even realize what he'd done until after he pulled it. So that was an unfortunate situation. But
just on that one, I was speaking to Will that I think it was probably that evening, because Mo was in my fantasy team. So I wanted Mo to do really well.
Mine as well. Exactly.
Quick interval here. Matt, how does it feel that I beat you on the fantasy league by one position?
I knew that you were going to mention that. It's that to your point, and kudos to Henry Tosh for having the fantasy league, right? Look, if there's anybody that I have to lose to, I'm glad that I lost to you. It's funny that, we're on the podcast and now we're sharing this. I mean, it's remarkable that there were 601 people in the fantasy league. And Henry, to your point, he was on your podcast. He was hoping for 250, and then he gets 601. And kudos to you and the two of us. We finished in the top 3%. I mean, 17th and 18th respectively, which was amazing. And so, anyway, back to what you were saying. Selfishly, I'm like, no, Mo, don't miss a lift because you're on my fantasy team as well. And I think we have these kind of funny conversations, but the podcast recaps that you were doing, the fantasy league that Henry did, it added something that was tangible and palpable. You become invested in other lifters and performances that you wouldn't otherwise, and it was nice that you had these recaps because maybe somebody had to work when the live stream was on and they couldn't catch it. And so to be able to tune into one of your quick recaps is very helpful, and it pours in. So shout out to you and Henry both for lifting up the community and pouring back in, because it makes it better, right? We're all just, high tide raises all boats, and it's cliche, but it's so true, and we're all doing our part put our hand in the pile and pour back into this community. So anyway, that was kind of cool. And yeah, I was cheering for Mo selfishly for Team GB and then selfishly for my fantasy points as well. And then he forgot his belt.
I say what I was actually going to say before the fantasy league popped into my head. Will was listening to me. He was like, he remembered salts, 2 types of chalk, talc, his phone, his headphones, no belt.
Yeah, right. Arguably the most critical, piece of kit is the belt, and that's the one that they forgot. And so yeah, it's unfortunate because Mo is a tip of the spear athlete who really deserved, quite frankly, in my view, and also my selfish view, to be in the A group. I think there was a logical break in the totals, and he should have been a part of that A group. And so I think in Mo's case, he is one of these tip of the spear athletes. And I think when he's able to finally connect all the dots, kind of like an Andy Nelson, we are going to see a breakthrough performance, and we're going to be like, aha, like that's what we've all been expecting and we've been waiting for. So yeah, shout out to him.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think he's working with Joe Stanek now as well, isn't he? His training going in Wales looked insane, which is why I put him on my team.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, he's rather consistent to the tune of making, 7, 8, 9 lifts. So it was a little shocking that he only made 6. So yeah, I mean, I jokingly told Bobby, whom I coached at the meet, I said, Bobby, because I picked her up at the airport in Vilnius and drove her to the competition along with my wife because we had a rental car. And I picked up Bobby, and of course the topic of the fantasy league came up. And my wife, Susie, was very emphatic of Bobby, I'll have you know that you're on my squad. And I said, look, Bobby, I said, I'll be quite honest with you. You were just out of my price range. so yeah, it was weird. That clearly was prohibitive, was the budget that you could only spend. And so that's what made it fun, because you couldn't, to your point, stockpile your team with all these number 1 seeds, if you will. And so, but all in all, it was great fun, and I'm glad that I did it. And it's funny that you in your cheeky way kind of reminded me through your stories. And so, because, it's where's the fun in it if we don't all talk a little trash?
Exactly. It's all part of the fun.
It is.
Totally. I'm so, like we already said, getting over 600 people enter was insane. I think it just reached 500 with about 3 hours to go, and I then turned my phone off, went to bed, and I literally woke up the next day, and the first thing I did was check, and it was at 601. But even so, my boyfriend does not follow powerlifting. He only entered because I basically forced him to. Every night he was checking, and he was asking me where my other friends were in the leaderboard as well. Like, I had to check in with my friends every day where they were so that he could see if he was beating them. I was like, yep. And like Carlina was in his team, and when the 84s were going on, obviously she didn't have the day that she wanted. I was like, I suggested her in your team because I thought she was going to do really, really well. And he was fuming that she wasn't having the day she wanted. And like on my team, there was an 83 called Kevin, who I'd never heard of before, from Sweden. And I was like, the whole time the 83s were on, I'm watching this insane battle where everything that's going wrong is going wrong, like could go wrong is going wrong. And then I'm just watching this guy, Kevin, who I've never heard of before. And I'm like, oh my God, he's having a fantastic day. And I guarantee if he's at the World Championships next year, I'm going to remember him.
Of course.
Because he was like the only lifter in the team I hadn't heard of. And that's literally the point, isn't it? Like, it brings us in to follow these lifters and support these lifters and watch these flights that we wouldn't normally watch.
That's right. Yeah. It was a lot of fun to play, and I'm definitely keen to play the next time for sure. Yeah.
100%. I don't think there was anything else we were going to cover. I think that's probably everything. Anything you've got coming up to shout out or anything? I mean, you've just got back from Worlds, so you're probably resting for a while.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And also, I'd just like to say, because I like to be authentic and I like to be transparent, I'm in the process now, as I normally do, of putting together my post-competition analysis and post-competition report. And so Peach and I submit that to the British Powerlifting Brass, and they take that, and then they're going to review that, not only Brass, but the Performance Committee. And so I am on a year-to-year contract, if you will. And so the understanding is that I'm going to submit this, and then I'm looking forward to sitting down with BP Brass and having a debrief and plotting ahead next steps. And so whether or not I'll be back on the team or if I'm not remains to be seen. But regardless, it's been an incredible ride. I'm thankful to be in this position. The next thing that I probably have powerlifting-wise would be the Masters World Championships. They're here in Reno, Nevada, so it's nice. It's a home game for us, I like to call it, in the USA, and my wife will be competing. So that'll be the next thing. Will be Master Worlds in October, and then of course I'll come to Sheffield in November. And then if I'm invited back, then of course I'll be at the British in December. So a busy calendar this fall.
Very brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's been good getting your input on things, getting your thoughts on things.
Yes.
And I just appreciate you making the time to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure and my honor.